Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gold Coast Locals podcast. We've had a couple of weeks off just recently. We've had some COVID changes, our new venue here at Manos. And so we're kicking off again with our podcasts. It's good to hear a lot of the local people asking us, when are we going again and who are we going to talk to next? So we're lucky enough today to have a very serious Gold Coast local here. A young gentleman by the name of Max Christmas is joining me today to have a little bit of a chat about his experiences on the Gold Coast and where we are and the things that we're doing. So how are you, Max?
I'm very good and happy to be here to sort of comment on the history and where we came from.
Yes, it's as you have seen, the Gold Coast has evolved quite a lot in the time frame that you've been a local.
Well, it goes back a long way to many of the early settlers. Going back, the early farmers and various things were Germans, French, and particularly in Beenleigh, the area there, that was all mainly Germans. And in the other areas, there was Indians as well. And the Indians were quite prominent in the banana growing and things like that on the steep hills. Also, in the background of Surfers and to Nerang, there was sugarcane mills and various things on the river at Isle of Capri, and at other various plant growing things that were well established in the area.
Yeah. So you've been on the Gold Coast for when did you arrive in this beautiful part of the world, Max?
I came here in 1953 from Brisbane. I left school at 14 and started an apprenticeship as apprentice carpenter when I was 14 in Surfers Paradise.
It's interesting. You and I both got the same hairdressers, and I was an apprentice carpenter as well. So there you go.
Well, I think of being a carpenter and apprentice builder, you really learn the real ropes about your country and the characters. And really, the characters have made any community anywhere in the world.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. And we've got a lot of characters on the Gold Coast, and we've had a lot of characters, and we still do. So, 1953, it obviously looked a little bit different than it does now, Max, and I think you've had a fair bit to do with a lot of the progression that's gone on in and around the Gold Coast over those years. So, give us a bit of an insight as to the changes that you've seen and what are the exciting things and the things that you've enjoyed being involved in.
Well, over the years, there's been many exciting things, and I'm talking about the different people and characters. I was fortunate enough to take a liking to girls, but that wasn't the real reason I was successful, because I wasn't successful there either. But I did fancy a surfboard, and I became quite famous as a surfboard rider. And the Gold Coast becomes famous because of the surfboard riders.
Yep. I
manufactured surfboards in my early days when I was 19, and there was Max Christmas surfboards and that, and I went to Hawaii, and also I was involved in the ocean and the surf clubs with the surf boats and competition and the matemanship of surf clubs. And I think from a community point of view, I learned a lot about being a person involved in the community.
Because you're still a very strong advocate for the Surfers Paradise Surf Club?
I am, and also I've been patron for the whole branch, and I've been patron of Surfers and my involvement in Southport Surf Club, Northcliffe Surf Club, and the other surf clubs in the whole area.
Yeah. I mean, it's that I suppose is a little bit about our culture in this area, isn't it? The beach. We wouldn't be anywhere without the beach. And back in the old days, they used to have the guy who used to do the spray tanning. Was it Don?
No, it was. I can't think of it. Anyway, he was famous for his. Oil.
Used to spray all the girls with his suntan oil.
Suntan oil, yeah.
As they come to the beach, way back in the good old days of Surfers Paradise, and anyone being allowed on the beach and all that sort of stuff. It's a fair bit different now, Max, isn't it?
Well, the place was very humble and small, and Southport was the centre, and also Coolangatta was the centre, and Burleigh Heads sort of thing, and Surfers wasn't even there hardly. It was dirt roads and various things, and you had to get a punt to get across the river from the Evandale area where the council chambers are. And it developed itself, but in my case, my fortune gave me the start in life was the surf clubs, competing around Australia on the various beaches and meeting so many people of different characters, and from wealthy people to people that was, tradesmen like myself, carried me for years and years and years in the future.
So you started off making surfboards and you got somehow turned into real estate over a period of time too, Max.
I was probably fortunate in that area that at the time when I went into real estate when I was 24, and I had no idea of the human behaviour of people, greed, misunderstanding, and just a whole learning curve about the human race.
Yep.
Buyer and seller, it's all confusing. And I learnt one thing you have to do is be a deal maker or a communicator and find out deep values of what they had, what they didn't have, and how many lies they told. I became an expert in that area. Hence, I became quite successful. But back to the surfboard days, I also was involved with Keith Williams when we brought the canoes in. It was Keith and I who were in Hawaii back when the America's Cup in '83. Mm-hmm. And on the way back from the America's Cup, we got motivated in talking about canoes. So we decided to start the canoe system in Australia, the Outriggers. And we went on to win, in 5 years, we went on to win the world title.
Because they became very popular they used to have an outrigger race up at
Hamilton
Island, didn't they?
Yeah, the big thing was Keith and I racing each other at Hamilton Island. And we were on all the TV stations, and it was a total marketing exercise.
Yep.
Putting Hamilton Island on the market.
Yep. You guys are very close, you and Keith?
I learned a lot from Keith. I learned a lot from most people. The number of people I've learned from in Australia, and some clever ones and characters, but this area attracted so many people that I met and had their success stories like Bondi and Skase and Eddie Kornhauser, and I goes on and on, Russ Hens, and I became politically involved with Joe Bielke, and I created a massive amount of business and income through his help and my connections in China and in Japan.
So you look at today, you look at how politics runs today, and you take a few step backs into the Joe days, and a little bit of manipulation, as they say. Apparently they call it, but we got a lot of things done back in them days, Max.
What happened? I was involved with Joe and the committee that got rid of the probate duties, the death duties. Mm-hmm. Not many people understood the death duties, but all the farmers in the whole of Queensland were suffering because of the death duties. So when they died, 50% of their estate had to be sold to pay the taxes.
Yep.
And that was tax. Joe, through the committee I was on, there was 5 of us on the committee, we ramrodded the whole thing in and got that abolished. We then kicked in a massive way for 10 years ahead of New South Wales and Queensland, and the money poured in from everywhere.
That's right. Well, then a lot of people moved up from down south after that happened, didn't they? Once they
that drove the Labor Party and the unions insane because they were 10 years behind us.
Yep.
And they had to go and crucify him, which they do with a lot of people. That's their approach to life.
That's how they roll.
Anyway, I admire them for their ruthlessness.
The things that they've got done. But as you said, it was interesting times back in those days, because the Gold Coast really hadn't reached its potential at that stage for the development that was going to occur, had it? It sort of took some small steps, and then all of a sudden we had people coming up here. We had the Chinese coming. We had the Japanese probably first coming in and that sort of stuff, and making the decisions about expanding and that sort of stuff. Now, I know that you had a lot to do with the Chinese. You and I have spoken quite often about the Chinese and the Japanese experiences that have come through the coast.
Well, 2 different subjects. The Japanese was, Joe and I were in Tokyo on a mission with about 5 other business people in Australia, or Queensland, and I decided to go back up for a couple of years. I ended up making a big contact with the family of the founders of Panasonic, who were one of the richest Japanese families in the world, and I became an advisor to them. And how I became an advisor to them was warning them of the difficulties we have in this country with the unions and the various things and the hold-ups and delays that can happen, and how to do, like Royal Pines was our first big project, $350 million. And another project was $400 million with Panasonic in Sydney called Chifley Tower, and another $700 million to finish off building it. Panasonic spent with me about $2.5 billion.
Wow.
Now, that's big time, and no one's ever done anything like that with a major corporation. But I was on the payroll for 11 years. And then with the Chinese, I went there with some Singapore businessmen to a bankers conference in Shanghai, and then started to create a big connection with CITIC, not the CITIC America, the CITIC Chinese. And that's the one that Clive Palmer was mixed up with. They're an awesome sized conglomerate. And I was on the payroll with them for about 17 years, advising them. So what I learned overseas, currently what I learned in Australia, but also I learned a lot about real estate in America and England.
Uh-huh. And that's helped drive the process through here, and you've utilised some of the skills from those things that you've met or you've learnt?
I went to a conference in San Francisco, Bank of America, which taught me one thing I had no idea about, was that the two different types of development which this city has in tourism is a tourism strip of about 10% or 5% of the land, and the other 90% is urban development. They're two different subjects, and they think differently.
Right.
So the council still is trying to come to grips with the understanding of those two subjects.
Mm-hmm. Will they ever?
Maybe because of this downturn, they'll see what the efforts are and seeing the destruction of the tourist industry and the empty hotels, which currently is 10%. They're down from 70% to 10%. The figures now are showing up in all their records, the rate collection, the whole lot, and the employment structure. So this downturn with the flu is making everyone awake as to the true importance of efficient management.
Yep. We definitely have to take on board the experience that we're having at the moment. And as we said, the Gold Coast it really lives off the tourism spectrum, doesn't it? You know, it's a big part of where we've done. And I know that back in the old day, talking of tourism a little bit, you had a little bit to do back in the old day as tourism was starting to be introduced to the Gold Coast.
Keith and I were involved with the starting of the Visitors Bureau, which is the Tourist Bureau.
Yep.
And we're the foundation members of that, and we're the foundation members with Jimmy Raptis and Sunland and those people in the development of the streets and Surfers Paradise and the footpaths and the gardens and the big palm trees.
Uh-huh.
So design concepts and that, but all the ideas I've ever come up with have been born overseas.
Everything's been, yeah. And so I suppose, lots of people go, oh, it's like Miami. You go to Miami and then people go, it's like Hawaii, and they go, it's just like being on the Gold Coast. So,
well, the similarities, don't ever be afraid to follow leaders. And I've always followed leaders, but Miami, you mentioned Miami, well, that's a market leader because the people from New York is like the people from Melbourne come to the Gold Coast. It's, the people from New York went down to Miami 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yep.
And they built Miami. Mm-hmm. And that's following the sun. We have the same ingredients here. If you go to the French Riviera, which I've studied in there, and also the Spanish Riviera, every tourist centre in the world I have been in, and I haven't missed a beat on any of them.
Yep.
And also the real estate aspect, the golf courses, the history of golf courses, and where they went public in Japan, and the memberships became $200,000 each.
Yes.
From $30. And that blew it off the wall with the golf. And people like a lot of the great golfers, Greg Norman, for instance, has multiplied his income by building golf courses, designing them.
Yeah, designing and developing golf courses.
So the whole thing has got full of fascinating characters and where my life has been.
Yes, well, absolutely. So let's go back one step to the Joe Bielke years. I mean, you have a couple of stories that... a couple of things that you've seen going on back in those days that have been beneficial to the Gold Coast, and some of those decisions weren't made amongst a crowd of people. They would have been made amongst a few.
Yeah, Joe was nothing like they describe him. He was an honest, fair sort of a person. I knew him when I was 19 years old. His mate of mine was a ski paddler, and represented Australia in the surf skis and the kayaks and that. And Gordon Jeffries, his name was, and he was his chauffeur in the hired car.
Uh-huh.
So he'd bring Joe down to the surf club to meet me. So Joe, I'm going to see Max with Joe. And Joe was about 38. I tell you what, he wasn't a star at all at that time. He was a preacher and he was religious and he looked like being absolutely no hope of ever being Premier.
Premier of Queensland.
I got on with him sort of thing and this and that, and we worked together. I organised the opening of the first building with Sir Justin Hickey out in Bundle Road, and I got Joe to open it. And he was one of the first contributors, and he said at the stage at that time, I'm going to bring $200 million to Brisbane, to Queensland. Joe loved him.
Well, that was what it's about, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I did introduce so many, Bondi and all that to Joe.
Yeah?
And all the major players, Panasonic, the whole lot, introduced them to Joe.
Ah.
And we organised how we did things. Nothing like the people talk about money bags and monies and this and that. The key to it, which I learned also in Japan, the key is not like in Australia where you rely on lawyers and accountants and all these other people
Yeah.
to lead the business, and politicians. The last thing you do is go to a politician to get something done. I'm talking about mayors and councillors. If they get involved, they seem like they've got an interest.
Right.
So they shy off. You use engineers at both the highest level in the council and the highest level in the government. You marry those two together. So all the major deals I got involved in putting the deals together was done on that method. And that's what the Japanese understood, and what they liked about me was that I was an engineering, because engineering has its things down, that what it is, to the banking side and also to the insurance side.
Yep.
So when you talk about cruise ship terminals and various things, the insurance companies and that have to be finally excised to all the plans and designs. And so far we've had 15 years talk about cruise ships, and it's achieved zero to start with of anything. It's still got 15 or 20 years to go and get back together.
We've spent a lot of money on a concept, haven't we?
Oh, there's so many things on concept and people are dreaming.
Yeah.
They don't understand the high profile importance of the engineers on everything we touch.
Yep. Do you think in council or in government, let's say government nowadays, do you think there's too much red tape?
Oh, there's all that, but the whole thing has to be rearranged. The banking system has to be rearranged, and also we're getting closer by the day to what they call the magic number is 40 million people. So when you've got a city of 25 or 30 million or 18 or 20 when it was,
Yep.
It's too small to be successful.
Yep.
So we're playing above our weight or below our weight, or whatever you want to call it.
Batting above our weight, yeah,
But
for sure.
as we get closer, we look at the surrounding countries like in the islands and that sort of thing, and New Zealand, and put us together, we've gone past 30 million.
Yeah.
So I think much larger, thinking in a different way altogether, and still do, thank goodness. And I just find it relaxing to think big.
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you. I think that I'm a big believer in, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it like flat out, because like why go half-hearted? And I think that, like some people in some cases in our political environments, sometimes they go with their own thoughts, their own, concepts and that sort of thing, and they don't really work. I to me personally, I don't ever get having a cruise ship terminal at the Spit. It's not something that I sort of...
One thing you've got, generally speaking, in all those cruise ships around the world, is about 20% of their time they can't get into the port.
Yes.
Because of the ocean. And also there's probably about another 25, 30 where you've got dangerous water. So the dangerous height of the ocean, of the waves on the Spit, is what you call a high-rated area.
Yes.
And it would probably restrict any shipping terminals when they do their assessments as to reducing 30%
Yep.
of the ships that can enter it.
Yeah, I agree. It's always bewildered me. I've done a fair bit of yacht racing and that sort of stuff, and everything like that. And I sort of go, I just don't know how these guys think they're ever going to get a ship in there. And as I said, we spent a lot of money trying to work out how we can get a cruise ship terminal on the Gold Coast. And
Well, they've been trying for 20 years or 30 years. They've gotten absolutely nowhere.
yeah,
We've had enough trouble on the Spit in getting some sanity into there, where the government's been collecting $8 million a year in rent. $8 million a year for the last 30 years, averaging, say, from 5 to 8 million.
right.
SeaWorld pays $2 million a year in rent. The Yacht Club, $500,000 and $500,000 for the moorings. Their collection is there's 3 million there.
Yep.
You've got another 5 or 6 in the other things. So the hotels and all the other bits and pieces there. It's all. No one ever wants to talk about money because they've got no feeling or any idea of money because they've never done it the political side
Yep.
themselves.
Yep.
Unless you handle the money and, but interesting you talk about tradesmen. Like I was a carpenter, Bob L's a carpenter, 2 or 3 others are carpenters,
Yep.
and also there's plumbers, electricians, and a whole host of tradies, and a mammoth number of tradies of smart guys you don't read of much, but
Yep.
were around, out in the suburbs, have been super successful, but at their rough days all.
Oh,
as well.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing. I know in the industry that I've been involved in shop fitting and that over the years, I've seen many guys who are really, really good tradesmen go out and start their own business and then not be successful. And I say to quite a few of these guys, they talk to us about that sort of stuff. And I've worked with saving some businesses and done that sort of thing in my time. And I say to some people sometimes that you can be a really, really good tradesman, but that's not going to make you a really, really good businessman.
I agree. You've got to be, say, in the property industry, say building and that thing, but you've got to have wear about 4 or 5 hats. Marketing is one, banking is one, taxation is one. There's 3 or 4 there straight away, and about 3 others.
Yep.
And health.
Yes.
And control your whole thing, and also vision.
Yep.
And you don't find any of that assistance anywhere hardly at all. And you'll find no teaching in whatsoever in the politicians of vision.
No.
In any government department, they are not taught. There's an old thing we all taught at school when I was growing up, is don't ever talk about money or religion. There was one thing denied. It's a dangerous thing because you're too stupid, really, to answer the question. And we don't know how to teach that anyway.
Well, that's how it is, though, isn't it? That's still today. I remember my father saying to me, never talk money, politics, or religion.
Correct.
They don't go together.
Yeah,
That's right. They don't go together.
And funny, because when they get to be politicians, they've had no experience of any of those subjects, and they live in fear.
Yes.
And so no decision is the best. I think 2 or 3 of the guys out here at the moment, and one in Surface, he has got no comment on any disasters at all.
Everything's good.
He doesn't
Everything's
know.
good. Oh, they got to learn. What do you think about our borders being closed at the moment, Max? What are your thoughts?
I can understand that at the time. There's a time where you've got to take a risk. No politicians want to take a risk at anything.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if it goes sideways, it's on her.
Look, my
Anastasia.
belief is that she's been directed by the unions to do that for the sake of the next election.
Yep.
And the unions to say, if you don't do that and close those things there, we will give you no money for the election, because she relies on $4 million of union money for the election. And they use that as a whip handle.
I know, being involved in the construction industry for a long period of time, that Queensland is one of the states where the union do have a lot of say, especially when it comes to building sites and how they're going to be conducted and what's going to happen and all that sort of stuff. And it's usually another 30% on top for all those involved as a cost factor just to work on a union site.
Well, the politics of Brisbane and Queensland, the real workers and the blokes with knowledge are the farmers, and the guys that deal globally with the price of produce, wheat, coal, this and that, sugar, God knows what. Those people in North Queensland are smarter than any of the blokes in Sydney in offices, right?
Yeah.
And smarter than any of the politics. But the unions took over Brisbane many years ago and have controlled Brisbane as the stronghold, and that vote in Brisbane beats, because at the time there's been, say, 2 million people in Queensland. There's 3 now, 5 now, I think, 5. But now there's about 2.5 to 3 million in southeast Queensland. But Brisbane is the anchor for the unions, and they're the stronghold, and they command Brisbane. And the people in Brisbane, you'd be surprised, that vote Labor are more doctors, lawyers,
Yes.
and that, and all the kids causing trouble are going to university with those parents at the up end, causing havoc at the universities and trying to save the world.
Trying to get their point across, like Jeanette. Yeah, that's
And
right.
It's incredibly amusing, but I mean, God bless Queensland if the other Labor gets in, because Labor could be really knocked out for the first time in its life
Here.
in Australia,
Yep.
because this corruption thing in their place, they've been alive with corruption. I have learned some good lessons also, besides those people I taught. I had some great lessons off the painters and dockers,
Oh,
who are notorious for everything incorporated,
yes.
and they bought some houses off me. So I was introduced to painters and dockers back in the 70s. Their control and management structures is frightening. Hello, Australia.
Yes.
And the unions.
Yes.
They ran the whole country their way. And the stories they told me, and I'm talking about massive, massive stories of... I couldn't believe they were telling me this story.
Yeah. But it's true, though. People don't understand just
No.
how much, say, the painters and dockers and those sorts of unions
I
had.
think the unions will not be able to... They'll be found out this time, because, see, the unions have owned the judges and the various people in power to squash the courts and various things. They can walk on the jobs and never get sued.
Yeah.
And in the building trade, they've annihilated so many people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a process that anyone who's been involved with commercial building, you've got to learn, and you've got to understand that it has a big effect on everything that goes on through that process. What do you think about building more high-rises on the Gold Coast and creating that sort of environment?
Look, there's going to be so many high-rises for sale, units. We're oversupplied. Brisbane's totally oversupplied. And for us to build more, all that's happening in the market, the houses are getting smaller, the units are getting tinier, smaller blocks of land, and really the people are paying more money for these tiny pieces than they were for 10-year-old houses twice the size.
Yeah, it's bloody crazy, isn't it?
And they are not going to, and because they believe in interest rates is going to stay down and do this and that and that, they're going to burn themselves. There's no inflation. That's the key issue.
Yep.
No inflation for the last 4 years. In 50 years of business, the inflation has run regularly from 3, 5, 7, 12%. And the booms we had was inflation was 10 and 12%.
Yep.
They created massive booms for a short period. And so look at the history. The charts are all there. Australians should start looking at these charts and history background
Yep.
if they can, and they should want to brighten their horizons for the sake of their children, and realise that everything they're saying in the press about the standard of living is slipped, and the education slipped, the unions, the university, all these things, and nurses, school teachers, all run by the unions.
Yeah, all dictated to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, it's been broadcast that now, but the problem is that probably 85 or 90% of the Australian public don't read or want to read anything like that.
No, well, they don't want to know the truth.
So what happens in a case like that? They will be really harassed, because the debt is going to go to $7 trillion.
Yep.
Now, to give you an idea of debt, our debt was $2 trillion for everything, the whole 5 or 6 subjects, 10 years ago. The housing debt has gone from a few years ago at 2.25 trillion,
Yep.
and it came from 1 trillion in 10 years.
Who's going to pay all this money back?
These numbers, listen, all these things I'm saying are in print. You can pick them up and learn it.
Yes.
And hopefully all you parents out there start reading that and get your kids to read that too. Because the new breed of my grandchildren I tell you, my daughters, I've got 2 daughters in their 35s, and I've got 5 daughters all told, and tell you what, they do know, because I have taught them
Yep.
the integrity, and any good father should teach them all this strategy.
Yep. They need to know. They need to know how to be business people. They need to be how to be nice people too. That's another thing that, you know, I think we as a community and we as a society needs to take a step back and you know, start to go, you know, we need to be nice to each other. The world needs people to be nice to each other. The way things are going at the moment, it's just everything's crazy. You know, some people feel like we're dictated to, some people don't. Some people feel like, you know, they're not being heard, and you know, and all that sort of stuff, which is all fair enough. But you know, like, I think one of the things that's caught my attention, Max, at this point in time where we are at the world, is that I feel like we have a lot more minorities dictating to the majorities about what's going on, what's going to be said. This stuff about taking Captain Cook off the thing now, and all those sorts of things. You know, like, you know, where is that at? I mean, that's history that's been.
Well, I agree with you. What has the power of the place is that the unions have the money, and the unions are throwing the money to suit themselves to get into power. But when they get into power, you'll notice not one of them can step forward at the moment with any idea of a global understanding.
No.
Now, their education and global, they're back in the 1930s with their understanding. And they have this enormous amount of money, and they've got 10, they've 5 of them, so they've got 5 super funds, and most of their super funds you'll find will be probably 30% less in value. They've gone there because the empty shops, the empty buildings in Sydney, where the people are not working in the you know, accounting firms,
Yep.
operating from home,
Yep.
this has a massive downturn for the superannuation.
Oh.
And people are going to be scared when they see all this in the next 12 months. They really will want to learn.
We haven't really seen too much damage as yet from this whole process, but as I say, the ripple effect, and there's going to be a lot of ripples that'll come through here.
The ones that haven't understood anything at all hardly is the people in Sydney. The young ones in Sydney under 40 are all saying that there's a new horizon of great success in September. Well, they couldn't be more wrong, because their prices are going to collapse by already about 10%, another 22%.
You're projecting it? You think they're going to come down that far?
I'm not projecting that because it's written in every paper just about.
Well, they're not.
32% is the call for Sydney and dropped house prices.
Yeah, well, it's funny, but if you go and watch the media and all that sort of stuff, they've got a real estate guy who comes on going, mate, we had sales of 60% sales last weekend. They don't tell you that the sales were like 15 instead of where they've been 50.
What it is, it's the easiest thing, because those people don't know any of the ups and downs of the reporters. Mm-hmm. They are told, but the editor has to sell papers.
Yeah.
And he's got to serve the 70% of the people that don't know anything.
Yeah.
So they want to hear that everything's going to go up. So their journalists are told to go and sell every bit of inch of story to make it look like it's all over and she's a beauty.
Yeah.
And then turn around and blame the governing government that they've created the whole problem.
Yeah.
They can turn the figures on now. The damage was done back with Rudd, and he set fire to the whole camp.
Yep.
And the corruption, the whole thing, Rudd and Wayne Swan. Those guys there are, and then the others all followed.
Yeah.
And then the state governments, but Victoria is an absolute basket case of trouble.
Well, I was going to say they haven't learned a lot, because if you look at what's going on in Victoria right now, I mean, my God, if you were going to be silly enough to get involved in that sort of stuff, you'd be smart enough to make sure you were never going to get caught, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Eh?
So it's they'll get caught because they can't help it. They've been more corruption, I think, than we've ever seen in my life in Victoria.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think everyone should take a big look at this, because this is exactly what goes on in the political arena, you know, in the back rooms and that sort of stuff, and it's not appropriate.
I have watched in the casino in Melbourne in the last 5 years. You'd be amazed the number of people I've seen from China that are all from the mafia.
Yep.
Meeting in the casino regularly working their way into setting up the Victorian government for things.
Oh, I've got I have no doubt whatsoever. I have no doubt. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have done some work in China and those sorts of places, and you learn very quickly that they're very savvy as business people. The Chinese, you know,
Oh, they are. Yeah.
they are very savvy, and lots of people don't get them, you know, and that you can look them in the eye and they'll tell you what you need to know. That's exactly how they roll.
They're all owned by the leaders and that sort of thing, and their whole growth up through the things are there. But actually, at the end of the day, the Chinese army are the controllers of the country.
Yeah.
The generals that are control, and if you still all those countries, dictatorship countries like Russia, the whole lot, are all run. North Korea particularly.
Yep.
The army, they have to serve the 5,000 army sergeant generals. That's roughly sort of a number, right?
Yep.
And they are like the lords, like in England, the lords.
Uh-huh.
They are the lords of the country, and they have all the special things, and they won't have to give up that pay. That's all.
Yep.
For instance, they get $30,000 golf clubs. The generals in China.
From who?
In gold, from the government.
In gold from the government, really?
Yeah, and that's paid for, and they're bought in Japan because they can't make the ones up to that standard. Up to that standard. Look, there's many tricks to the bow. I do know a little bit more than the average Joe.
Max, I know you know plenty. So that's why I reckon that I really want to do this again and sit down with you, because I know a lot of stories that you and I have talked about as well that I think the people would love to have a listen to. You're a character. You know exactly what's going on. You still meet with the people who are holding the top places and that sort of stuff in the Gold Coast, on the Gold Coast, and in our community. So I think it's interesting, and I like the fact that we've got an opportunity to sit down and do these sorts of things, and just get a little bit of an idea about some of the history that you've sort of experienced over the years that you've been involved in business on the Gold Coast. So I hope, Max, we can get you back in here one day, so we can sit down and we'll concentrate on a few little stories about a few people in relation to things that have gone on the Gold Coast. Some of our politicians who have been involved in what's gone on the Gold Coast, and I'll be interested to find out what you think is going to. I mean, you've been involved with the growth, the development, the tourism, all those sorts of things on the Gold Coast. I'll be interested to see and get your thoughts on where you think the Gold Coast is going to be in another 10 or 15 years.
Well, one positive thing you can count on for certain, right? That sun up there isn't going to go away. That blue sky up there is not going to go away.
Yep.
That beautiful ocean out there is not going to go away. This is the foundation it was built on. Now, you can talk about who built what and how they did that. They're only mortals and this and that. They used growth, investment and all those words, right? But at the end of the day, I've always retreated from the word investment, because it's like the weather, it can change.
Yep.
Up and down. So I used our techniques in the company and didn't sell investment. We sold lifestyle and health.
Yep.
I suggested to the whole community here that they start looking at those factors, and that's not going to change. You've got a certainty there of power. I mean power. At the moment, the people in the community of the whole of Australia have got one power called fear. Fear of the unknown, uncertainty, and confused about the leadership.
Yep.
That fear is not going to go away for another 2 or 3 years. So we're going to have a lot of hospital cases. We're already having about a ratio of 7-to-1 increase in suicides.
Yes.
I don't know whether you realise this, that the public or the police never talk about suicides. That's a state law.
Yep.
And they don't want to frighten people. But fear and uncertainty and health is massive.
I totally agree with you. I think that there's a lot more people who are going to struggle to come out of this environment than there are, people who are going to be successful, because people do get caught in a way of life. They get caught into a system, and that system will dictate to them where they're going to go and how they're going to go, because a lot of them, as you said, don't have the gumption or the guts or whatever you want to call it to get out there and actually have a crack and do something. And I think that's the only way that you've got to look at what's going on in the world at the moment, and that is understand that there are opportunities out there. You got to be savvy to go and have a look and find out what they are, because I do agree with you. A lot more people are going to be a lot worse off after this experience.
Exactly, and the evidence will be there, but health and love, care and health are a certainty to continue.
Yep.
And that's what people want, it's as simple as that, and we've got it here.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I love where we live. That's what I post on my Instagram all the time is I love where we live. We don't get the opportunity to, we do get the opportunity to go to the beach every day and enjoy the lifestyle that's part of why I want to live here. I said to someone the other day when we were talking, and I said, like, for me, this is my happy place. I love where I live. I can go to the beach every day. Ridley and I, we go for a ride on the beach. We have a swim. We've got access to some beautiful parts of the world. I think our council's done a good job with enhancing things like our bike tracks and those sorts of things, which gives us the opportunity to go out and enjoy our lifestyle through that process.
We've got plenty of water as a major. That's gold.
Yeah.
We have plenty of water in the dams and the various things in the canals. We've got fabulous assets here in just the real estate values, things like that. We're going to get the desire to live here. Probably it'll be fantastic, the growth, but give it another 2 years and 3 years to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, get yourself set in to be part of the journey.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, and I hope a lot of people in Australia start to look at it from the perspective of let's make Australia great. Let's come and travel to the Gold Coast. We've got some beautiful things. I noticed they're opening up our theme parks again this weekend or early next week. I think they're talking about doing those sorts of things. So, hopefully we can get the borders open. We can get a few more people onto the Goldie to spend some money and get our community start to get some legs again.
Well, that's good thinking, but there's definitely. It's going to take 2 years minimum to have a base. It's not going to happen in 6 months or 12 months. It's no good telling the people you've got to do some hard yards first of recovery.
Yep.
And the damage been done by the huge debts we have, and who's going to pay for them has to be faced up to. And the whole thing is that there's nobody going to pay for it except ratepayers.
Well, that's the only place it can come from.
So that's going to hurt them because unless they change the tax system, which they have to incorporate that so that people got something left over. Currently, everything's been drained dry. The water rates here, for instance, are a criminal charge.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely ridiculous. So
all
good. All right. Well, Max, thank you for coming in and having a chat with us today. I really do appreciate your time. And as I said, I would enjoy the opportunity to get you back in and let's have a bit of a chat about a few other things. Lighten things up a little bit too and have a bit of a laugh about some things.
I'll have to be careful though. I mightn't be around. They might throw rocks at me.
No, I think you'll be fine, Max. I don't think it's fine. No, all good. So thank you very much for coming in and spending some time with us on the Gold Coast Locals podcast. And we look forward to getting you back here and having a bit more of a chat in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max. Cheers. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.